which number live stream is this for you?
Many. Like normally there's zero problems.
Nice. That's me.
Um,
Got it.
no, I don't know. The loop back thing in the DAW is quite strange, I have to admit. Um, okay, well, we are live now, so there were a bit of technical issues, but hello everybody. Sorry for that abrupt start. We're having a clunky day here, and there's a technical problem going on with the audio screen sharing. So unfortunately, we won't have audio capture to show VOXCRAFT, but we will have screen share, and we do have a special guest here today, Matthew Weiss. Do you want to introduce yourself really quickly to everybody? We've got about 70, 80 people in the room already.
Oh, am I a spectral guest? That's awesome. Not yet. I'm still alive. I'm Matthew Weiss. I'm a Grammy-nominated audio engineer with a wedding band that clicks on tables. I primarily work with Akon, and I'm currently in Los Angeles at the Airbnb with the Convict team and Con himself. I also own a recording studio in Miami, Florida called The Good Days.
Cool. I didn't know that. That's very cool. I'm gonna be spending a little time in Miami. I'll have to see the studio, maybe book a session if you're not out of my
Come on,
price range. Yeah. Cool.
probably
Um,
not.
cool. Well, very cool. It's great to meet. We've met today for the first time, Matthew and I. Matthew just did a really great video on VOXCRAFT for the VOXCRAFT release. I think it's on your personal channel too, right, Matt? Yeah.
Yes.
So Simon running the UJAM chat. Maybe we could link that video, the overview of VOXCRAFT, on the chat here in YouTube. But so today, we are going to discuss a little bit about just generally vocal mixing and some pain points, processes, best practices, things that maybe Matthew does personally, tricks or advice that he has, and also a bit about the new UJAM release, the VOXCRAFT plugin. Which is a very new product for UJAM. It's a brand new vocal processor. We haven't had anything like this before, vocal-wise, so it's a really cool tool. There's a lot of useful utilities in it, as well as creative effects. So we'll take a little look and have a little discussion on that later. And as usual, we are doing a raffle. So we're raffling off one license to VOXCRAFT to any active user in the chat, and by active we just mean you are either showing support or asking questions, participating in general. Could be questions for either UJAM or Matthew, or questions about VOXCRAFT. So yeah, with that, I would actually like to hear a little bit from you, Matthew, in terms of your level of experience with working on vocals specifically. So you're a mix engineer. How do you feel about mixing vocals, and what, over the years of learning the processes, what has been your biggest maybe pain points or learnings to maybe help people learn a bit here in the chat, or in the stream rather?
I would say I'm extremely experienced with vocals. It is the number one thing that I work on because my background is primarily in hip hop and then moving forward into R&B and pop, where the vocal performance is usually, or at least very frequently, the only live element. And I am also oftentimes the vocal producer. So
Hmm.
vocals is my number one thing. Pain points. I think the biggest pain point is when a vocalist is just willing to accept whatever comes out of the other end of the speaker. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of very, very talented singers and rappers who do not necessarily hear themselves recorded all that often or are not necessarily recording artists. And so they don't pay attention to how their tonality sounds through the microphone.
Hmm.
More experienced artists will respond to what they hear in the headphones, which presents its own set of challenges because you have to be thoughtful about what they're hearing. But the less experienced artists will be, they'll be basically eating the microphone or not
Right.
adjusting their vocal tone outside of what they're hearing, or won't be willing to take one can off or do what they need to do in order to create the best presentation
Hmm.
through the mic.
Cool. Yeah, so there's actually a lot of, so that's something that you've learned, is there's a huge emphasis on actually the performance and the way that they're delivering the vocal, you could treat the vocal recording as the product, kind of. They need to deliver something that's actually going to end up sounding good after you give it some love. Yeah, that's cool.
A lot of artists don't necessarily understand that you can naturally EQ and compress
Hmm.
your voice and make it blend with the track simply through delivery.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. That's cool. But so once it enters the DAW into your domain, what do you have like standard? So your approach to mixing vocals, is it always on your toes, like for the specific use case, or do you have go-tos that you find yourself like at least starting with or reusing, or is it every single time just what exactly do I need to do from scratch for this specific vocal? Do you lean either way usually?
I don't have a template, if that's what you're asking about when it comes to mixing. I have a recording template because the template allows me to move faster. But
Sure.
for mixing, no, I start purely from scratch.
Yeah.
I try to embrace every record as its own entity as much as possible, and having a template, there's nothing wrong with having a template, but for me, the first 20 minutes is listening to the record anyway. So I'm
Yeah, sure.
just setting things up while I'm doing that.
Got you. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's going to lead ultimately to the best mixes, right? Is just give the mix the love and attention that that specific song needs. So, very cool. Um, cool. Yeah, so we've got a lot of people already throwing some support in the chat. Major differences, advantages compared to, for example, CLA plugin. There's a lot of talk about just vocal processors in general. Um, So let me actually open the door a bit to VOXCRAFT. So Matthew, when you first, what were your first impressions after using it for a couple of minutes, or maybe an hour or two, or did those impressions change? What did you end up liking about VOXCRAFT when you made that video?
Okay, so the thing that I like the most about VoxCraft is that, well, there's two things I like a lot about VoxCraft actually. The first is that it allows me to create more complex sound design kind of effects, which for anything in the rap to pop kind of world, anything that's sort of synth based, EDM, you know what I mean, like
Mm,
putting aside the singer-songwriter genres and stuff like that, a lot of what makes the record work is the creativity of the effects, and trying to find a unique effect is always a little bit of a battle. I'm doing
yeah.
that yesterday for like hours, just working
Yeah.
on single effects and things like that. So having a really nicely routed and structured multi-effects tool is really cool. And also, I really like the randomize button.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those two things, because to give a longer answer to an already long answer, part of my process is I'll have my lead vocal, and then I will have like 8 tracks underneath it in a folder,
Mm,
and I'll move. You don't see this in my videos as much because it makes it hard to see what's going on if you're not using it, but I'll have effects on those audio tracks, and I'll copy and paste audio down rather than doing throws, meaning
right.
rather than doing automated sends. Well, throw is an automated send. And so I'll have VoxCraft or some other effect on there, and it just creates this one unique effect, so I can have
Mm,
all these little one-time things.
yeah, they're all
Uh,
different,
the
kind of.
the thing that I don't like, and this is not really a don't like, but the thing that I don't like about VoxCraft is you actually don't need all the options all the time.
Sure. Sure.
Um, it's very, very useful as simply a formant shifter. It's a great sounding formant
Mm-hmm.
shifter, and so you can literally disable all the other stuff and just use it on that, and it becomes a really wonderful creative tool.
Exactly, yeah. That's something I also was pretty hands off, although I am a product manager. This was not a product I was involved in, but I did get the chance to test it very, very early on when there were even more features that ended up being in the product, and it had no interface to use. It was kind of a nightmare to test. And then just 2 days ago, I actually tried to use it in Ableton for the first time since it came out. And yeah, I think it's kind of like a blessing in disguise. Is like for a UJAM plugin, there is quite a bit more control over a very specific thing in this domain, which is vocal mixing. But what I do like is that, yeah, you don't need to use everything. Some of the presets do engage all of the modules, but you could just turn the ones off that you don't want to use. If I don't want wet effects, if I don't want like I didn't actually get to play with the chopping module too much yet, because usually the thing that impressed me the most was the character module, because, and I think that's kind of in the domain of what you're saying, like that vocal tone thing. I've had a problem finding when I work on vocals, also in a poppy electronic kind of context, like getting that unique angle on the vocal to have it sit just differently in the mix. It doesn't have to sound like crazy affected, but I found that like the fuzz mode in the character mode or the radio mode just had some really nice filtering that just gave it instantly some kind of aesthetic, you know? So there are really cool and really useful modules in VOXCRAFT in isolation. Like the formant pitch thing, that's very similar to Little Altar Boy, sounds just as good to me. And then the pitch, there's a kind of built-in auto-tune, which is also very cool and useful. So there's a lot of stuff you could use in isolation that is really effective. We've got some hellos. Yeah, hello, Kipshid Zianuka. Hello, Adam and Matthew. Well, hello to you too. I love randomized buttons, says Spaz. Yep, that's true. Yeah, it's a kind of fun little way to just like see what else you could squeeze out of the plugin. We do have that in our USynth series, like having a synthesizer with a randomizer that controls everything is also very inspiring too. Yeah, Oper, I agree with Adam regarding the character modes. Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned earlier at the start of the stream to everybody watching that we have a technical issue today, which is that the audio streaming from Ableton is not currently working. So I was going to play with VOXCRAFT in real time, but what we can do is at least look at it. So in a minute, we'll switch over to the screen sharing part of the stream, and I'll have Ableton open with the plugin. Some of you may not have even seen it before, so...
What we'll do is you turn the knobs on VOXCRAFT, and then as I'm speaking, I'll imitate what it does.
He'll sing, yeah. Matthew will sing the reactions.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear how you sing auto-tune. That'd be great.
I sing through my nose like this.
All right, but yeah, let's. I'm gonna actually just do that now because you'll still see us and hear us just all the same. So I'm gonna just pull up the plugin here, and some of you may not even have seen this yet, so it's rather exciting. Ta-da! So this is VOXCRAFT. Now you can kind of have a face to what we were describing here about all the separate modules. It does look like there are a lot, but they're very cleanly organized into their own little lanes, and they can all be disabled as you please. There's a boatload of presets that kind of show you the spread of what this thing can do in terms of like creativity or actually mixing and polishing. Like the goal here was to make a product that could kind of do it all. You know, you have the essential modules to get a quick and clean vocal mix that is the right level of thickness and compression and everything. But then also creativity, because we're a UJAM, like we do want you to be able to find some stuff in here that'll make you be like, oh, and like cause this spark to go off, you know? So mostly we're looking there at like the wet effects and the chopping and the pitching and stuff. But very, very cool product. It now sits besides Subcraft in the Craft series, kind of two plugins that focus on a specialty, and this one is vocals. But yeah, I mean, I normally would be able to show what each module is doing, but since we can't do that, I can give a quick explanation for what each thing is doing, and then we can answer questions if anyone has questions about how it's working. Then we can tag through those. But so in general, you have a voice section at the top, and this is basically everything pertaining to tuning. So on the left, you have a pitch control and a formant control. If you are familiar with SoundToy's Little Altar Boy or any pitching control by now that has formant, etc., it's doing the same thing, and it sounds very, very good. It sounds really cool. You can link the controls if you'd like to, so that they follow each other and stay kind of gridlocked. And then on the right side, you have the far right here is a basically one knob auto tune, which I thought was really cool because I hadn't tested it before. But even auto-tune by Antares is like, there's a number of controls there. I think even in the simple version, there's like 4 or 5 different knobs. And this is just one. And I thought that was really unique and interesting because you set a key. The key of the song here was C major. And then it's just an amount. And you can just hear at mid and low values, it does some subtle tuning reinforcement that doesn't completely devour the signal. But you can do that hardcore auto-tuning. And I'd be curious, Matthew, how much does auto-tune live in the work that you do in pop, and do you do hip-hop as well, or what other genres do you mostly focus in your mixing?
Yeah, so my main genres are Latin and Latin pop genres, pop,
Nice.
hip-hop, and R&B. and now quite a bit of VDM as well. So yes, auto-tune is a something I constantly use.
Gotcha. So what did you think of the one knob auto-tune approach here? How did that make you feel?
I like it because sometimes I'll get my auto-tune all set up in a way where it's pretty transparent,
Hmm.
and if I go harder with the auto-tune, it will start to move things around in a way that doesn't feel good.
Right.
So having another layer of pitch control on top of it starts to bring back some of that tonality that some people dislike pitch correction for that tonality, but at this point in modern pop music, it almost feels weird if we don't have it.
Hmm.
So in the video that I demonstrate, I'm actually using, even though the vocal is already tuned, I'm actually using the pitch correction at 100% just to get a little bit more of that like lasery vocody effect.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, and one thing I will say on this note too is like, at least in my production processes, I do a lot of and a lot of people embrace hardcore tuning and creative tuning, even more so for like doubles and like side takes, and harmonies. Because like when you bake something in just like subtly and mix it down and maybe pan it and kind of surround a lead vocal with a really hard tuned version, it just reinforces the natural melody. Like there's ways to use hardcore auto tune tastefully to actually help the natural sounding lead. But then you may also not want it to sound natural. Sometimes, I mean, that auto-tune effect is a very specific type of thing that is now also embraced and understood in music production. And so it's kind of cool when you just when you use it well, even on a lead, you know?
Why use something tastefully if you have the option to use something distastefully? Come on.
Exactly. That's true. I mean, now more than ever. Yeah, some of the genres, some of the stuff people are making now is crazy on purpose, and it's different, and that's kind of the vibe. I think we're in a very saturated time, especially with AI generating music. Do weird things that will make the listener be like nice and like remember your track, you know. So yeah, love the built-in auto-tune feature. It's really great. Very talented DSP engineers behind the scene throwing that one together pretty impressively fast too. And then there's this unison control. So this is the last control in the voice module that controls the tuning. And unison, I wish I knew technically what it's doing, but it just sounds like it's a kind of a doubling, kind of a chorus effect that just makes the vocal really wide. At least from my minimal testing, that's what it sounded like to me, and it is really wide and it's really thick. So that's a cool control to include, because right off the bat, if I'm working in VOXCRAFT and I'm like, maybe I'm planning to mix this vocal to be a double, I might already want it wide and I might already want it hard tuned, and maybe I'll drag the formants a little off to give it a bit of an edge, you know. So this top section is a really good starting point to determine like the strategy of the vocal you're mixing. And there's a voice
It's
mix, which is like a dry wet for the whole section. Yeah, sorry, Matthew. What'd you say?
it's very common a lot of the times in like Afro genres to use that sort of modulation. Is really very good for that. You only need a little dab of it though, like 2%, 3% goes a pretty long way.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Good point. All right, let's see. I want to give the chat some love here. How does this pitch correction compare to other auto tune plugins? I touched on that briefly, but I mean, I have a perpetual license to the actual auto tune plugin, and to me, the quality sounds very, very similar, if not even the same. And I was just saying, in summary, it's just a simpler approach because it's one knob, and you get it built in with a lot of other effects. So that's the quality wise seems identical to me, but it's about what kind of control you want, you know. Um, can VOXCRAFT do gang vocals from one voice? I think you mean like stacking and choir type effects. Yeah, I think it's pretty good at that because there's a doubling switch at the bottom, which actually creates a double, and then the unison control, which I think knowing that there's a doubling switch, it must be more on the chorus end of the effect spectrum. So it's not just doing the same thing as doubling. But if you had both of those engaged, that would already create a pretty wide sound from a single vocal. And if you were to imagine stacking VOXCRAFT on multiple vocals, like Matthew outlined earlier, and you did some stereo stuff on each one, then you could probably lead to a pretty dense stack of vocals, is my assumption. I don't know if you've done anything like that with it yet, Matthew. Have you made any kind of successful choir or like ad-libs or backing tracks with the effects in this thing?
I haven't tried it with the using the doubler. I mean, that's a pretty interesting concept though, because it would get a very different result than just doing a ton of stacks.
Hmm.
But I'm in the studio all day today, so I have
Yeah.
to give it a go.
Okay, so someone's asking what scale options are available in the pitch selection. Yeah, that's going to be all scales. Then actually pentatonic, I didn't even notice, but there, yeah, every major and minor scale that you would need, and then I guess pentatonic scales, which is cool. So you should have pretty good control over those options. What is the focus EQ feature? Yeah, down at the bottom, and there's some comments on the super glue. We will get to these soon. I can give a short answer quickly, but the focus EQ in UJAM products is pretty consistent. It tends to be kind of like a tilt EQ. In general, though, it's like user perception. Like if I'm going to the left, things become kind of darker. So it's kind of a low pass. I don't think it's a hard cutoff low pass or an aggressive slope or anything, but I do think it kind of just leans that way. And then vice versa on the opposite side. So if you go towards the right, things become brighter and higher frequency, and towards the left, it's just like a nice little final single knob EQ control on the end of the output chain. Just kind of a little useful. And then super glue is, I believe, a glue compressor type of thing, but it really squashes things. I was playing with this and I actually haven't read the manual either. So I'm kind of speaking today on behalf of a user because I used it as a user and this is my level of understanding, but we do have people on the UJAM account in the chat and we have a very helpful support team if I don't know anything, just fair warning. But yeah, the super glue with the fun little splatter, somebody commented about that looking like a sneeze. It could be. Sneezing glue, maybe. That's like a really aggressive squashing compressor that seems to kind of amp things up quite a bit. Yeah. But let's go module by module again quick. So we did the tuning voice section. And then you enter the main effect chain with all these separate modules. And this is where you get a lot of standard options that are kind of important in vocal mixing. So the first being a dynamics control. There's a couple of different sort of compression models that also sometimes do a little more than that, I think. But you basically control the input into how much signal you're sending it. I can actually run audio so you can at least see it animating, even though you won't hear it. And so if I engage the plugin, you will see that there's a little level meter here where it's showing you a gain reduction kind of visualizer. And then there's a gate as well. So if you wanted to gate out some noise, it's kind of all in one control there. You can gate out some noise and then you can compress a bit. If you're familiar with other one-off vocal compressor plugins like I don't know, Waves RVox or something like that. That's kind of the goal here, but the benefit is that you actually have different models. So there's not just like one algorithm. There's a couple to pick from, ranging from gentle to totally overcooked. And this one, I had a lot of fun with this because it's a really easy one and done, just like starting compressor. And when I work on vocals, RVox is also heavily used because of that. It's so simple to just throw it on and it sounds like it's thickening it up without overcomplicating it. Are you an RVox fan, Matthew?
I am, but I use it a little differently than I would use the compressor module in VOXCRAFT.
Okay.
RVox is very oftentimes like if I have a dense arrangement and I've got my vocal sounding basically the way that I want, but I need to push it to compete with like heavy
Mm-hmm.
synths and things like that, it'll be like the last thing in the chain. I don't like RVox for general compression purposes, except for maybe on background vocals because I feel like I can push it as far as it needs to go
Mm.
and people don't really hear the artifact. I think that actually the VOXCRAFT for like upfront compression, the stuff that you're starting with to sculpt your sound, is actually more useful.
Gotcha. Cool. Very cool. Yeah. Yeah, but I have noticed that RVox is really just, it makes things kind of powerful. And I think there is a mode in here that does that pretty well. It might be punchy, but there's way more range in here, and I think you can use this way more tastefully for more than just that. So that's a good point. We got a question in here asking, is there a way to rearrange the modules? There is not a way to reorder the modules. You do have control on the chop. There, you have a control of whether this is pre or post reverb, because we know that wet effects like reverb can be a limitation. And when we get there, chopping onto a reverberated signal is kind of a benefit when you want crazy stuff. So this one's kind of cool because you can decide where the chop is being routed. But let's see. I'm going to take another look at the chat. Let's see. Superglue. Okay, yeah. So UJAM account says Superglue is a compressor that not only limits the maximum loudness, but also brings up low levels to flatten out the volume and glue the vocal into position. Yeah, so somewhat different than what I said. I apologize, but just going off of my ears there. But so then we entered the character module, and this is what Matthew and I were talking about before. This one is really cool because it's just a tonal modeling, kind of. You've got modes fuzz, saturate, radio, vinyl, lo-fi, and bit crush. Fuzz is kind of this fuzzy saturation mode, and with any of these, if you drive them really hard, they do get pretty aggressive, which is cool. So you can go over the top, but most of them, especially the first three, are pretty subtle, and I really enjoy mixing them in subtly because they give a sort of warmth or a bit of an edge to the vocal that it didn't have before. And this is what I was talking about, to me, is really effective because it's like so simple to pick a mode and give it a little bit of juice and control the tonality of that effect a little bit, and it just sounds different. I found that it takes me from recording my own vocal on an SM7 to, like, that sounds so flat usually, and it takes me into that realm of, oh, this sounds like a vocal in a song finally, even if it's just slightly. And to me, that was actually my favorite thing about VOXCRAFT, is just how easy it is, because otherwise it's hard to know what kind of effect I'm looking for. I'd like to just go through a couple reliable like sounds, but otherwise I'm torn between all these different plugins I own and processing chains, and like, what could I do, you know? So yeah, I find that there's a lot of daunting work in approaching creative vocal mixing. Like, where do I even begin, you know? Do you have any tips on that, Matthew? Like, how do you, if you know you want something creative, where do you usually start?
So in Pro Tools, and I reckon in other DAWs, there is a way to set it up where everything defaults with all automation lanes active. And so starting with that right away sets you up for what really vocal mixing can be, which is not how you set something, but how you change something. So if you're using little bits of the character control, let's say you're using a little bit of the fuzz or something like that, you can use your control for how much you're using and automate it along with the vocal performance, so that either you can do both ways, although the logical way would be like, if the vocalist starts building tension within what they're doing, then it's not about creating this one singular effect. It's about automating that in and emphasizing what's already happening using the effect, right? So
Cool.
suddenly the emphatic voice is getting broken up, and or going the other direction, which I've never tried before, but you know, could be really cool, where when the vocal is softer, you have more of the fuzz happening or whatever it might be. And then as the more intense stuff starts to happen, you back that stuff off. That could also be a very interesting contrast. So don't think, I guess the short of that is, don't think of vocal processing as a static singular concept. Think of it as something that progresses and how the voice changes, and you get a lot farther.
Yeah, that's actually a really great like pro tip. Yeah, because a lot of the times, like when you're sitting in production territory and you just trying to move, it's like these instant gratifying things that inspire you and you move on. But then you really have to revisit mixing land, you know, and there's a lot you could do to actually bring something to life. That's a really cool tip that I should try. It's just like following the natural performance of the voice and automating in these effects, like at the to mirror that, is really cool. It's a cool idea. Very cool. So you've done that or tried that with this module specifically, the character module. Did you find any other components of VOXCRAFT to be useful in that way too?
Yeah, so in the video that I did, one of the things that I wanted to do was create transition effects during the vocalist performance. So there's a couple parts where I'm automating the formant to shift down. So it's going right, and then bringing in the chop module so that it actually splits up and becomes more choppy to kind of go into the next
Hmm.
part. And that's something that's a concept that I've used many times, but it was really easy and accessible doing it that way with VOXCRAFT.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we've got some questions that I want to revisit. Someone's asking about the presets. There are a bunch of categories. They're asking specifically about the categories of presets. They're kind of based on application, like what you're looking for. So more creatively, you've got a chopped section. You've got a distort section. So within these, you can expect a range of subtle to severe, but you're dealing with chopping and distorting, so they're probably more creative. Doubling, there's probably a lot of stereo work in here with a unison and the doubling, etc. But then introduction, this category is usually a nice demonstration of the spread of what the plugin can offer. So if you went through this and stepped through these presets, and as with all UJAM products, every parameter can be saved in a preset. So it could tell you that some modules are disabled or that certain values are changing and different modes are changing. So the presets are the biggest way to get an impression of what VOXCRAFT is actually capable of. Large spaces, this touches probably on the delays and reverbs and creating big spaces out of your vocal. Mix and polish are more probably utilitarian, focusing, I would assume, on character dynamics and EQing. Pitch and harmonies, here's where you get chipmunk effects and monster effects and crazy formant effects and auto-tune effects. So they're not organized by genre. That was the question. They're organized by approach. This is called VOXCRAFT. So if you're crafting a vocal, what are you looking to do? That's kind of the way to approach the preset dropdowns. Yeah, that's a great way to organize the presets. Thank you. Hopefully that answers the question. Are there any other UJAM products that you suggest using alongside VOXCRAFT? Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, I could say that if you don't use the wet effects, going to the UFX series would be really cool. UFX delay and reverb and even filter. There's basically more intense versions of these modules that do way more and have finishers baked in. So if you're looking for an even more creative delay or an even more experimental reverb, you could actually stack those after VOXCRAFT because the UFX plugins are really cool for that like instant creative sauce, you know. But yeah, and then let's just make sure we go through all the modules here. So then there's the filter module. I actually have not played with this one too much, but it gives you some pretty standard filtering modes that you might look for. Comb filters, a dirty LP. It's a low pass. I don't really know what is dirty about it. Is that a standard thing? I'm not sure. Matthew, maybe you know. But
I don't think that's a standard thing, no.
I was like, is the shape dirty? Is it like a low pass, but it's a little like crazy? It might just be like kind of saturated, or it might give it a little bit of a grunge. That's my guess. But then there's a high pass, low pass, and a band pass. And you have control over the cutoff, the resonance, and the envelope. And so you can kind of tweak that in and kind of mix. This is more on the mixing end of like cleaning up the vocal to sit in your mix better, but also with dirty LP, phase, and comb, those filtering modes can get kind of creative too. So it's cool to play with that. And also the randomizer helps you kind of expose new tones. Someone was asking about the randomizer. There's a little dice at the top, or die, I guess. And you click it and it automatically shuffles every parameter to a varying degree. And that's really good for getting inspiration because, like I said, I might not know much about which filter mode I want to use, but if I get the right one on there, or if I get the right character one on there and I can just hear it, then boom, that's pretty effective. And you can lock the mix value. So if I want 100% wet to just hear the effect all the time, I can lock that and shuffle a bunch more. Cool. Let's see. We can keep moving forward. Someone said, just occurred to me that this can be used as a crazy reverb for other things than vocals. That's true. I actually did this. I put this on a synth pad when I was testing it because I was like, oh, I want to formant shift my synth pad, and I also want to give it the same reverb that I put on the vocal, and I want to do other stuff. This is totally usable on anything, just from my perspective at least. Because I don't think anything is too tailored specifically to vocals that it's not usable. Maybe the auto-tune, but that could still be cool on like a lead. So I +1 to what you said. You can use this, not only the reverb module, the chopping, the delay, the filtering, the character, all of it is totally cool on anything you give it, I think. Cool. Yeah, I would love to win one. Yeah, just a reminder again, we're raffling off one license. So if you're active in the chat, asking questions, etc., your name will be entered into a random name picker, and you might win a license to VOXCRAFT. But as always, there's a free trial. You can go download it and check it out. and it should still be on intro sale. So maybe Simon or whoever's on the UJAM account can paste the pricing info again, so everyone's aware of what the deal is. But yeah, delay mode and reverb mode are next, and these are kind of straightforward, but there are a couple modes in here, like for example in the delay mode, that took me by surprise and to me were very cool. So mono, stereo, and ping pong, these ones are kind of straightforward just by the naming. You can set the rate and the amount, the dry wet, and the feedback, the decay, how long it takes to fully decay. But then you get to grain, detuned, and filtered, and as a user, I didn't know exactly what they were doing, but they sounded very much like the names. There's one that's a little wonky and wobbly sounding, and that's detuned, and there's a filtered one that is less aggressive. It sounds like it's filtered. I think it was sounding low pass to me. Like it's not, sometimes when you delay the whole signal and all the brightness goes with it, it's a little overwhelming. So that one was really nice. And then there's a grain mode, which I think is granular, but I don't actually remember what the vibe there was. But those three I remember being creative and not, maybe a little more unexpected in a delay module. And that leads me to a good question for you, Matthew, which is, what is your preferred way to handle wet effects when you're processing vocals, specifically delays and reverbs?
Typically with delays and reverbs, I'll make sure that those are on isolated tracks so that I can do whatever kind of processing or treatment I need to do to those separate from the dry.
Mm-hmm.
So in this particular case, when I was experimenting with it and when I did the video, I did have an instance of VOXCRAFT on as a send so that I could use the delay at 100%. But all the
Cool.
treatment that I needed to do was already in VOXCRAFT. So,
Cool.
it was convenient in that sense.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, you could turn all the wet effects on 100% wet and throw it on a send bus for sure. But yeah, that's even better if everything else on the vocal chain is before it already. That was kind of the goal, is at least to get you in a really good position prior to entering the wet effect modes. So very cool. And then reverb, again, pretty straightforward. I think it's very similar to the delay in that there's some standards that you'd expect and then a couple more creative. The gated one was really cool because it's a gated reverb, so it cuts off the signal past a certain threshold, which is cool because A, it can be cleaner in your mix, but also B, when you actually hear the gating, it's almost more creative rhythmically. So I kind of thought that was fun to play with. And then reverse reverbs are always cool, kind of spacious and trippy. And infinity, we have a reverb mode. I think this mode appears in a couple of our UJAM products or a very similar version of it, where it's just this totally cool algorithmic washed out reverb that just like, it's big and it's spacious and it sounds kind of cosmic to me. So that's fun as well. And then the chopping module. I mean, creating vocal chops is a very common thing, and vocal glitches and just like weird. I think in general, a lot of people aim for just like creative vocal work, stuttering, or just something that the ear doesn't expect. And this module is very cool for that. You have a rate control that syncs to the DAW. And like I said, you can send it before or after the reverb. So if it's pre-reverb, you're chopping before the reverb, and then the reverb will apply a nice ambience to what you've done. But if it's not pre-reverb, then it's affecting the reverb, which means if you have a big wet sound, there's much more content going into the chopping module and slicing it up. So that creates a lot more content for the chopper to do its thing, which I thought was really fun when I was playing with this. There's a repeat, there's a reverse, a random, which is really quirky, and then a gate, a pump, and a freeze. And these are all going to be pretty different and pretty inspiring. So definitely try each of them at different amounts and different rates, and even automate the rate, get weird with it, and you can get a big picture of what it's doing. Okay, so Simon said we're ending the raffle soon and decided to give away 2 licenses to the top attendees. So if you remain active in the chat, your name will be entered into the raffle. Now we're actually giving away 2, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, a pricing reminder, you can grab VOXCRAFT for $39 until March 15th. If you already own any UJAM plugin, even just one, then your price is $29. That's the loyalty price. So until March 15th, if you have a UJAM product, this thing only costs $29, which is a pretty good deal. But yeah, so those are all the key modules that we've touched on. The bottom controls are a little more global. So you have an input before the whole signal chain and an output. And then an interesting thing here is auto level, which to me sounded kind of like a vocal rider. It's associated with the dynamics, but they're not related. Like they're not affecting one another, but the auto level is kind of like a vocal riding, and it gave me a much stronger foundation and a much more consistent vocal to start with. So that's a cool feature. Vocal riders are pretty useful sometimes. And then low cut, high cut, these are basic filter tonal controls. And then you've got the global mix for the whole plugin, which I showed before. You can lock that from randomization. The doubling we also touched on before, giving you a nice wide spread. It's a dub. Sorry?
I gotta head on out, Adam.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Matthew. We will actually close on that note. I'll wrap these last few controls, and then we'll close the stream and do the raffle. But thank you very much, Matthew. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Have a good one.
All right. See you. Okay. So yeah, I guess it's time we can do the raffle now. Simon, if you're ready to launch a name, and then we can close up the stream. And yeah, we covered the super glue, we covered the focus EQ. I will look at other questions in the chat if there are any. You're going to see two of me probably because Zoom is going to be weird, but it's double the me. Yeah, someone was asking, let's see. Thank you for the support, Michael. UJAM's quality on their plugins and instruments have been pretty good and consistent. Yeah. I know. Shame we can't hear it on this chat, and I do want to apologize again for that because today has been a weird day of technical issues. My OBS has been not all sorts of problems. Not seeing Ableton running, not getting the audio from Matthew, doubling the audio. It's been a nightmare to say the least. But yeah. So thank you all again. I'm just waiting on Simon to run the raffle. And if you have last minute questions, Adam, the new Matthew looks like you a lot. I know. It's uncanny. But yeah, we're waiting on the raffle. Thank you guys very much for tuning in today. There's a lot of you viewing live, which is really cool. And I am sorry again about the audio demo. We might try to figure out a way to either do another stream or record a video of just demoing this a little bit better to make up for it, because obviously the sound is what speaks for itself. Even though it looks quite nice, we're very good at tasty UI designs. The sound is really what the product is about. So it's really unfortunate that we weren't able to do a demo. I have some stems in a session pulled up, but yeah, let's see if there will be an announcement from the UJAM chat or account. And again, VOXCRAFT has a 7-day free trial. It's on intro sale for $39 until March 15th. And if you own a UJAM product, even just one, then it's $29. And we've got our raffle. The raffle's closed. Congratulations to Pascal H. HSMR CIWA and to, I don't know how to say this, KANALI, Canala. I'm just going to, yeah, it's in the chat. It's the UJAM account. It's in the chat. Someone's asking about CPU usage. This came up a couple times. I personally haven't used it enough to speak on that, but we do go through some rigorous quality testing, and we wouldn't release something that's not usable in a pretty dense session. So I don't have statistics on what the CPU consumption or usage is, but try it out for yourself. There's a free trial. So if you download it and put it in a big dense session and use a couple instances of it, you could see based on your system how it handles the plugin. But yeah, congrats again to our two winners. And thanks again to Matthew, who's not here, but it was great chatting with Matthew Weiss, Grammy-nominated mix engineer. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll do an audio demo in one way or another in the near future. But try it out for free if you want to, because it's a very cool product and it's a brand new convention, a brand new type of product for UJAM. So we definitely want to hear what you think and what you make out of it. So if you make cool stuff, feel free to share on socials and tag us or send it to us. And if you have any input, reach out to support and share your thoughts, because we would love to hear from our users. So thank you again for joining us on this stream. And I wish you all a great rest of your week. And congrats again to our 2 winners. All right. Thanks, guys. Talk to you next time.